Welcome, everyone, to Alaska Quarterly Review's Reading and Conversation series. I am Ronald Spatz, co-founder and editor-in-chief of Alaska Quarterly Review, and this event is being recorded and will premiere on the Alaska Quarterly Review YouTube channel. Before we begin, I would like to make a few important acknowledgments. Alaska Quarterly Review gratefully acknowledges the Anchorage Museum for hosting and providing technical support for this event, and the Center for the Narrative and Lyric Arts, Alaska Quarterly Review's 501c3 umbrella organization, which makes this event possible. I also want to make a land acknowledgement. Alaska Quarterly Review recognizes the indigenous land on which all Alaskans live. Alaska Quarterly Review is located in Anchorage, and Anchorage's Dena'ina homeland. Dena'ina is the language spoken by the traditional present and future caretakers of this land, and land acknowledgement opens a space with gratefulness and respect for the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspective of indigenous peoples, and marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. Today, we're delighted to feature Alice Hatcher, who will be reading her short story, Leaving, that was first published in Alaska Quarterly Review. An academic historian by training, Alice Hatcher currently teaches fiction workshops at the Tucson branch of the New York City-based creative writing school, the Writers' Studio. Hatcher's stories and essays have appeared in Alaska Quarterly, Pleiades, the Mississippi Review, Fourth Genre, Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, and the Bellevue Literary Review. She received special notice for her nonfiction in the Pushcart Anthology, and in 2024 won Read Magazine's John Steinbeck Award for fiction. Hatcher is the author of the novel, The Wonder That Was Ours, Dzanc Books, which Kirkus Reviews called admirable, sharp-witted, well-read, and with a long view of history. Her voice is dignified, erudite, and often funny. LitHub deemed it a visionary first novel, powerfully imagined. And Lindsey Drager added this: through chiseled prose, potent imagery, and a cast of narrators who operate as a hat tip to Kafka, Alice Hatcher's comi-tragic cautionary tale about race and class is impossible to forget. Part farce and part lament, the wonder that was ours reminds us how so much depends on perspective. I am delighted to welcome Alice Hatcher.
Thank you, Ronald. I just wanted to say it's a huge honor for me to be here today reading. I am so grateful, and I say that with the utmost sincerity. Just by way of introduction, I left a very all-consuming teaching job in 2017. I was teaching history at the college level and submitted one of my first stories to the Alaska Quarterly Review. And I think it's worth mentioning that I didn't have any experience submitting. I had what felt to me like the wrong degree for an aspiring writer. I didn't know a soul in the literary world, and I was well into my 40s. In short, I felt like I was wasting the stamps on the envelope that we all were mailing then with our submissions. And so I was blown away. I remember very clearly the day that I picked up the phone and heard Ronald's voice telling me that he had accepted my story, Reduced Circumstances. And I am not understating anything when I say it was a game changer. And it gave me the confidence I really needed at that point to start writing at a critical moment when I had no reason to believe in myself. So I'm very grateful to the Alaska Quarterly Review. And since 2017, I've gained, I think, an even bigger appreciation for the journal as a teacher at the Writers' Studio. I can't tell you how many times I've heard students say or teachers say my first publication was with the Alaska Quarterly Review. So it's really a journal that has gained a lot of reputation here in Arizona, I know, and elsewhere. for having integrity and taking the slush pile seriously and really giving a chance, walking the walk when it comes to giving a chance to aspiring writers. So I am so grateful to be here today, to Ronald Spatz and to all the readers at Alaska Quarterly Review as I read my short story, Leaving, which the Alaska Quarterly Review just accepted. So with no further ado, I'll read my story, Leaving. He had waited too long to prepare his mother for the evacuation everyone in the village had been expecting for weeks. He had just been trying to protect her, downplaying rumors of an impending invasion to spare her the kind of anxiety that disordered her thoughts and loosened her grip on fading memories. Now she was sweeping breadcrumbs off the dining table and tossing them into the cold hearth, as if she didn't understand the urgency of leaving. He glanced at his phone, at live footage of a military convoy crossing a bridge, and stepped up to the front window. Outside, brother was wrestling a suitcase into a citron, watched by a young man, a boy really, from down the road, standing beside a rusted moped and cradling a large can of turpentine. Soon the road to the border would be glutted with overloaded flatbed trucks, women fleeing on foot with cloth bundles strapped to their backs, and cars loaded with petrol cans, water jugs, and food drawn from cupboards nearly bare after 2 years of unremitting conflict. He backed away from the window to escape the boy's notice, only to find his mother gathering a platter that 2 hours earlier had been covered with heels of rye bread, a block of goat cheese, and the last tomatoes from the garden. He imagined his brother's anger about how long he was taking, and as his mother shuffled from the room, heard his brother shouting. Berating himself for being so weak and so easily cowed by his mother's stubborn nature, he made his way to the small kitchen at the back of the house. He found his mother standing at the sink, clutching the platter and looking through a tiny casement window at the twisted apple tree growing between the barn and the garden wall. He imagined the ghost crowding his mother's vision, specters of his grandmother washing sheets in a steel tub, his grandfather who had taught him as a young boy to shear sheep by hand and given him a sip of brandy to calm his nerves after he nicked a ewe's leg and burst into tears at the sight of fresh blood. His father, a man he'd known only from creased photographs, and the village widows who had prayed beside the graves of each other's husbands and died off, leaving his mother to inhabit a world of fragile memories, as she was now, whispering to herself and waiting for the water spluttering from the tap to run clear. "We need to leave," he said, watching her guide a line of dissolving breadcrumbs toward the drain, "before the roads are blocked off. Do you understand?" She traced a line of worn gilt on the platter's edge with her fingertip, and then, as if she hadn't heard him, began drying the platter with a dish towel. She tensed when he placed his hand on her back. He felt the vertebrae of her hunched spine shift beneath his fingertips as she drew away from him, with the platter pressed tightly to her chest. "We can't take the platter with us," he said, following her to the front room. "It will be here when we return," he continued, unsettled by an intrusive childhood memory of trying to calm a sheep in the moment before its slaughter, while his brother looked on in disgust. He thought he detected signs of comprehension in her clouded blue eyes, but then she set the platter on a stand on the buffet and returned to the kitchen to gather 3 plates from a drying sink. "We don't have time for this," he said, when she returned to the front room and set the plates on a shelf above the platter. She gathered a candlestick from the table and dusted its base with the hem of her sleeve. "I need to get things in order," she said, speaking for the first time since breakfast. He was trying to ease the candlestick from her hand when his brother entered the house. "We need to go," his brother said sharply. bending over to collect 2 suitcases sitting just inside the door. Now! He released his mother's hand and, with a sickening sense of time speeding up, followed his brother outside. The car was resting heavily on its suspension, weighed down by baggage and boxes filled with old books, silver flatware, and family photographs. The boy was still standing beside the moped, with the can resting on the ground at his feet. As his brother slid the suitcases into the trunk, he studied the precocious furrow between the boy's eyes and the scuffed uppers of the boy's oversized work boots. Before he could ask the boy about his family, his brother slammed the trunk closed and pressed the stub of a cigarette between his lips. "Why isn't she ready?" His brother lit the cigarette and set a box of matches on the moped's cracked leather seat. He forced himself to meet his brother's eyes. "I'm trying to keep her calm. By letting her wash dishes, tell her there won't be a house soon. Everything she's ever known is in that house. Then she can stay here and die in it. This is the only way she'll go," he said. His brother gestured at the boy. "We can't ask him to stay much longer. If she doesn't hurry, I'll find ways to make her go." He tensed at the intimation of violence, the brutishness and single-mindedness that had bolstered his brother's unbending will through droughts and floods, and now the war quickly coming to their doorstep, and felt sick and ashamed. "We should have let her make this decision with us. She has no mind left, and it's not just about her." His brother took a sharp drag off his cigarette, crushed its butt beneath his heel, and pulled a set of keys from his pocket. "It's time to get her into the car." He turned away from his brother and went back into the house. In the front room, his mother was folding the cloth napkins they had used at breakfast, using her thumbnail to sharpen their creases. "You don't need to clean up," he began. Without looking up, his mother turned a napkin over in her mottled hands, as though she were examining its hem for loose threads. He approached the table and touched her shoulder. Again, she tensed, and again, he had the same feeling he'd experienced as a young boy, trying to calm a sheep on its way to slaughter, slipping on the muddy barn floor and stung by his brother's pronouncement that he would someday starve to death because he lacked the stomach for killing. Panic stirred in the pit of his stomach, and just when he thought he might go mad trying to coax his mother from the house, she set the napkins in the buffet drawer. She slowly turned around, took in the swept hearth, the lace runners stretched evenly across the table, and the crystal sugar bowl her own mother had given her, and then gathered her threadbare sweater from the back of a chair. If her mind was too weak to compass the enormity of what lay ahead, she was walking towards the front door, still, taking tiny steps and pausing to bless herself at its threshold. "The boy will take care of things while we're gone," he said, and when she paused on the stoop to consider the apple tree, he saw her eyes water and realized she had overheard whispered conversations about failed counteroffenses and closing borders, that she understood the finality of leaving, and possessed sources of sorrow and strength he could only imagine. As he helped her into the car, he saw his brother nodding at the boy, and the boy reaching already for the box of matches. The boy was barely tall enough to mount the moped, but soon he would splash turpentine on the barn doors and burn the sheep his brother had herded into stalls strewn with hay to speed the fire, douse his mother's curtains and strike a match to set the house alight, torch the brittle leaves of the apple tree and poison the well behind the house so that no stranger would butcher their sheep or steal their fruit, shelter beneath their roof, or quench their thirst with water from their land. The entire village would be reduced to ash by nightfall if the boy did his job. Sliding into the passenger seat, He knew the boy possessed a desperate resolve and a greater affinity to his brother than he himself would ever know, and that he would always live with a phantom pain where, as his brother had once said, he had no stomach. Thank you.